In this video, we'll be looking at the costumes of the X-Men characters in Midnight Suns, those being Deadpool, Storm, Magik, and of course, Wolverine. If you've played Midnight Suns, then you might be thinking, isn't Magik more of a Midnight Sun in this game than an X-Men? And yeah, she is, but she's literally wearing an X-Men uniform, so forgive me for grouping her as an X-Men character. This is the third video in a 4-part series I'm doing looking over all the suits of the characters in Midnight Suns. So subscribe if you like this and want to see more. Anyway, why don't we get started with our arguably least X-Men affiliated character, since I don't think he's ever been on an official version of the team, Deadpool. Deadpool's default suit is a little hard to talk about, because it's pretty much perfect. I mean, look at him, that's just what Deadpool looks like. Specifically, this is a perfect rendition of his more modern design from around 2013. You can tell because of the design of the forearm and shin guards. It's a great costume, rendered beautifully. The only reason you wouldn't like this suit is if you just don't like Deadpool. For whatever reason, Deadpool's default suit has the most recolors of any costume in the game outside of the customizable player character. Most heroes have about 10 recolors for their default. Iron Man has a little more at 13, Hulk less at 5, and Deadpool has 15. These recolors can be divided into 3 groups, different amounts of red and black, wacky colors full of saturated, weird colors since he's such a wacky guy, and then the third group is mid-slop. It goes without saying that none of these are as good as the default. Regardless, this is a 10 out of 10 perfect Deadpool costume. Deadpool's Midnight Sun suit is... don't get me wrong, it's funny. The witch hat and the little unicorn on his chest, it's hilarious. The design totally fits him. But I don't like it that much. It's mostly the gold, which looks gaudy on this thing. There's just too much of it, you know? Even this recolor, which goes back to Deadpool's typical color scheme, still looks bad because the red retains the reflective material of the gold, which looks bizarre to me. I think these silver recolors look better. 8 out of 10. It's decent and I can totally see how more people would like this one, but I don't ever use it. Deadpool the Kid is based off a very short-lived alternate version of the character that Deadpool met during some multiverse hopping shenanigans. And I do mean short-lived, he only appears in 2 pages. This page I'm showing you right now, where Deadpool pops out of a portal and meets him, and the next page where Deadpool shoots him in the head and leaves. Despite his short page time, I can see why they chose to adapt the suit for this game. It's a pretty spiffy cowboy suit, and they've adapted it perfectly. They've even changed his handguns into revolvers. There's just, one little problem. Go ahead and guess what that problem might be. If you've seen any of my Spider-Man videos, then you probably know that my issue here is that the suit is goddamn orange. Now, every time I make this complaint, I get pushback, so let me give several disclaimers. Firstly, if you're watching this on a computer, then your screen may be changing the color of the display a bit from its original color. I've noticed this with my computer and I've looked it up online and it seems to be a somewhat common issue. So if you don't think that this suit looks orange, maybe try watching this section on your phone. Secondly, the suit does look a bit more orangey in the character select screen than in missions. And lastly, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I have an overly broad definition of the color orange and that this is actually a shade of red. For the sake of argument, okay? Well, that doesn't change the fact that it's a shade of the color that I don't like, especially with how his grenades and belt buckle are actually red, so they don't match the color of the suit. I get why he's colored this way, that is more or less how he's colored in his limited appearance, but normal Deadpool is also colored that way, so I don't think this suit was intended to be a different color from Deadpool's typical palette. That comic was just colored a little weirdly, so while I understand it, I don't think it was necessary. Unfortunately, there is no recolor that makes the suit the normal shade of red you'd expect from Deadpool. There is an inverted black and red color scheme that uses a different shade of red that is better, but it's not the same thing. The other recolors are crap. 8 out of 10. Pretty good costume, but not one I use much. I'd probably use it more if the default suit wasn't so perfect, and I'd definitely use it more if it was actually red. Deadpool's X-Force costume is from the comic book of the same name. X-Force, at least the version of the team from 2008 onwards, is a more covert and militant branch of the X-Men, hence the darker colors of the suits. I'll get right to it. I don't think this costume should be in this game, by which I mean it shouldn't be its own distinct suit. The X-Force suits in the comics were essentially just recolors of the character's basic suits, and that's all this suit should have been, a recolor of Deadpool's default suit. And they almost have one. Add some red elements to the Steel Wind color style, and boom, there's your X-Force suit right there. To avoid the recolor accusation, I think they went out of their way to make the suit more different. Particularly this Y-shaped harness that he definitely did not have when he was on the X-Force team. Instead, this design is more like older versions of Deadpool's suit, and if that's what they were going for, then that's fine. They've even got a red and black recolor of the suit, which is a dead ringer for Deadpool's older costume, except that it still has red eyes. Why? Why didn't they recolor these to be white, or even yellow? I'm not kidding, this completely ruins it for me. And yeah, the other recolors are bad. And I want to take a second to address something. You might be looking at that yellow and blue one and be thinking, oh, that's a reference to the X-Men uniform, why didn't he mention that? Listen, I only mention recolors if I think they're interesting or if they look good. So if I don't mention one, it's not because I forgot or didn't know what it's referencing. Most likely, I didn't mention it because I didn't like it, or it's not interesting enough to mention. Okay? Overall, I think this suit is a waste of a suit slot with an incredibly disappointing recolor, but it isn't necessarily bad or hideous or anything. 6 out of 10. That's all for Deadpool. I think Midnight Suns did a good job with his cosmetics. Deadpool's one of those characters that got a pretty stellar design right out of the gate, so he doesn't actually have that many alternate costumes in the comics because why fix what isn't broken? That being said, I do have 2 suits I would have liked to see. The first is Symbiote Deadpool, from a What If story where Deadpool got the symbiote on Battleworld instead of Spider-Man. I'd honestly be fine with this being a recolor of his default suit. The second is this guy. In the Deadpool Kills Deadpool story, this evil alternate version of Deadpool appears at the beginning of the story and gets killed shortly afterwards. This guy doesn't have an official name, so I'll call him Stitchpool on account of his stitched up costume. Stitchpool appears in at least 4 pages before getting iced, meaning that he's had more page time than Deadpool the Kid, so I'd actually say he's more worthy of being adapted. Now then, on to Storm. Storm's default suit is based off a more recent outfit of hers from the 2018 X-Men Red series. The suit from the books wasn't one of my favorites, but this game makes several changes to it that only make it look worse. First of all, the suit covers up the window on the top of her chest, which I dislike for reasons that I won't specify yet should be obvious. Then they've moved the X logo from her waist up to where that window used to be. The X being on her chest is fine, but the suit was so obviously designed with it being on her waistline like a belt buckle that now it feels like something is missing. Worse still is that because of these changes to the top of the outfit, the lines of the suit no longer form an X, now forming an upside down Y shape. They've also plugged this area around her neck with a solid yellow piece of fabric, which doesn't look right either. The only other pieces of yellow on the suit are these thin lines, so seeing this thick block of the color doesn't match with the rest of the suit. And the edges of the collar that border this yellow chunk are also yellow, so it's yellow on yellow and no, dude. Lastly, there's her cape. In the comics, you can tell this collar piece is actually part of the cape, so you can see how the cape actually connects to the rest of the outfit, which is pretty interesting. But here, the cape is separate from the collar. That's not a criticism, just an observation. What is a criticism is the cape itself. Instead of the typical large billowing cape, it's been turned into this puny triangular thing. Why? Were they trying to make it look like a lightning bolt? If so, they completely failed. In a vacuum, this suit isn't awful. It still looks like Storm, and it's still clearly an X-Men costume. But as an adaptation, it is so needlessly bad that it boggles the mind. Another example of a suit being changed from its source material for mostly no reason, and it only looks worse because of it. 4 out of 10. Unfortunately, none of the recolors can save this thing. True Colors and Team Leader go for more typical X-Men uniform coloring. Wild Hunt reminds me of Storm's Marvel Now costume. Then there's Night Shift, which isn't a reference to anything, but the all-black color scheme is decent. Storm's Midnight Sun suit is pretty good. The gold, black, and white color scheme fits her like a glove. I like the crown, I like the coattail, loincloth, honestly not sure what to call this thing. Storm has always had a regal air to her, and this suit really brings that out. Not much else to say here, it's a good suit. The white and silver versions go pretty hard too, 8 out of 10. Storm's punk outfit is, I guess, a fan favorite, but I've never liked it that much. I don't care for casual outfits in general, but for a character as grandiose as Storm, I think it's especially ill-fitting. It's neat how there's both an all black and all white recolor, the other two are crap, and I'm giving this thing a 6. Not a bad suit, it's rendered well, but it's not something that interests me in the slightest. Storm's last costume is her silver suit. This is her suit from the 1990s, which was of course popularized by its inclusion in X-Men the Animated Series. The suit here in this game is, in my opinion of course, not the greatest rendition of the outfit. See, the suit here is mostly white with only a handful of silver pieces like gloves, boots, and shoulder pads. And I don't like that because the whole goddamn point of the suit is that it's supposed to be silver. It is called the silver suit after all, not the primarily white with a little bit of silver suit. And while I do appreciate the cape, since this is the only costume Storm has here of the real cape, it is still a little on the smaller side. The Force of Nature recolor that makes the suit black does look pretty cool though, and that's the one I use the most. Still bothers me a little how the bodysuit is a different color from the other black bits, but it's not as frustrating here. The other recolors do nothing for me. Overall, I'm giving this thing an 8. Despite my issues with it, it has great hair and an alternate color that I really like. And with that, we're done with Storm. I'm really torn on her. While her Midnight Sun suit and black recolor for her silver suit are pretty good, I'm unenthused by her punk suit and completely let down by her default. Storm has had a lot of alternate costumes in the books, but outside of her silver suit, I really only want one other costume. This one. I don't know what its name is, so you'll have to look at the screen to see it, but this is pretty quintessential Storm, particularly with the cape being attached to her wrists. That's such a distinct design trait for Storm, and unfortunately there isn't a single suit in this game that has it. We've now gone over 2 characters, which means we're officially at the halfway point. I am hereby obligated to remind you to subscribe and also follow me on Twitter. Now, onto our next X-Girl. This default suit for Magik... If you watched my Midnight Suns review video, then you'll have already heard my thoughts on this costume. To reiterate, I think it's a boring, outdated X-Men uniform that doesn't fit her due to its bright and colorful palette. Now, let me expand on each of those. The bodysuit is clearly inspired by Magik's costume from the New Mutants book. That suit was basically an X-Men trainee suit, you know, the thing you wear before getting a real costume. And as a result, it's pretty basic. I say that it's outdated because while the New Mutants was a comic from the 1980s, these suits are nearly the same thing worn by the original X-Men in the 1960s. And yes, it is true that something being old doesn't inherently make it bad, but I do think that the older X-Men suits are pretty bad. The X-Men and their uniforms have evolved so much over the years, with even the New Mutants themselves getting more modern costumes. Twice. So this suit sticking so close to those older designs feels like a mistake. And no, throwing a leather jacket on top of this bodysuit does not magically make it good. Then there's the aspect of this suit not fitting her as a character. Magik has had a pretty tough upbringing, which turned her into a closed-off edgelord supreme. So I don't think bright yellow is the best color for her. At least there shouldn't be so much of it. Her modern costume from around 2013 is an all-black getup that I think fits her far better. She's still wearing it in the comics today, and other games base their default suits for Magik off this costume as well. I really wish some variation of this was her default here in Midnight Suns. There are some recolors that are a bit better, but I still don't like the overall design of this costume. 3 out of 10, this is honestly the worst default suit in the entire game. Magik's Midnight Sun suit is a heavily armored suit that I think is doing too much. The helmet is the thing that throws off the whole suit. It's just too big. Like, if a huge buff dude wore this outfit, then the helmet would look fine. But Magik and Nico are the smallest characters in this game, and putting this giant helmet on such a small frame looks odd. Outside of that, the suit's fine. I think these recolors are neat too, but 6 out of 10. The New Mutants suit is based off Magik's original New Mutants costume. No, really. I know this because some of the suits in Midnight Suns actually have descriptions. For whatever reason, these suit descriptions are only for the premium costumes and only in the shop, which sucks because most players won't ever see these descriptions. I really wish these were just in the game. Anyway, the description for this suit specifically says that it is inspired by her costume from the original New Mutants book. I don't think I have to tell you this thing looks almost nothing like that suit. If anything, her default suit looks more like her New Mutant suit than this thing does. Midnight Suns had a few prequel shorts introducing each of the members of the team, which you can find on YouTube. In Magik's prequel short, where she's recruited onto the Midnight Suns, she's wearing this suit, but then wears her default for all the other ones. So, what? Is it canon that she originally wore this suit, joined the Midnight Suns, then went back to the X-Men to get a different costume that looks older, by the way, so she could wear that with the Midnight Suns? Like, huh? Anyway, to discuss the suit itself, it's okay. It's definitely a more modern and less silly version of the X-Men uniform, but it's still a little basic. It's pretty much what you would expect from a more tactical superhero costume. I don't think it does anything interesting. The more black recolors are alright, I guess, but nothing special. This is the suit I use the most with Magik, not because I like it, but because it's the least bad costume she has. 6 out of 10. The Phoenix 5 costume is the last suit for Magik here. This is based on her outfit from the Avengers vs. X-Men story, where the Phoenix Force was split across 5 different X-Men: Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Colossus, and of course, Magik. This game makes several changes to the suit, and the most obvious change is the addition of this frankly hideous helmet. They've given her pants, which is whatever, but they've also put spikes on them. See, in the comics, the suit was only spiky on Magik's left arm. Magik having some kind of armor or spiked detailing on her left arm is a pretty consistent design trait of hers. The spikes on her Phoenix 5 outfit was just doing more of that. However, with this version of the suit having spikes on the pants and the helmet, this design trait is entirely lost, because now the spikes are consistent across the whole suit except for her right arm for some reason, which achieves the opposite effect because now it's the right arm that stands out. There are mods for the PC version that remove the pants and helmet to make the suit look more like it did in the comics, and surprise, it looks better that way. Honestly, I don't mind the pants, it's just that ugly crustacean looking helmet that needs to go. None of the recolors are bad, but the only one I think is noteworthy is the black and silver one. 5 out of 10. While it is a pretty bad adaptation of the suit from the books, the elements it retains, like the red armor and flaming sword, are still kinda cool. That brings us to the end of our time with Magik. Once again, if you've seen my Midnight Suns review, then you already know my overall opinion on her costumes. That opinion being that Magik is a consistent visual disappointment. There isn't a single suit here that I'd call good. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Magik's modern costume should have been in this game. I'm legitimately baffled at its exclusion. I don't like Magik much as a character, so I don't have any other recommendations other than that. But for people who actually do like this character, please let me know what costumes you would have liked to see for her. And with that, it's time to move on to our final character, Wolverine. Wolverine's default suit is based on his classic yellow and brown suit. I've never been a fan of this suit, and I've always thought it was inferior to his yellow and blue one. Aside from the mustard and poop colors, the design of the suit is rather basic as well, lacking the cool stripes that his yellow and blue suit had. This game tries to make the suit a bit more interesting by giving it a more angular design, most noticeably in how the colors are cut around the top of his chest. It helps for sure, but it's still not enough. There are a couple of recolors here that are pretty cool. Tiger is one that I really wish I liked more. Black and yellow should be a really good color combo for Wolverine, but I feel like the shade of each color is a bit off. Of course, there is a yellow and blue recolor called Classic, and it's alright. I think the shade of blue is a little too light, and it's just not the same without the stripes, but it is still pretty cool. Lastly, there's my personal favorite to use, which is the orange and black High Alert recolor. It reminds me of Wolvie's costume in X-Men Evolution, which I also thought was cool. Outside of that, he has a bunch of junk recolors. I made a joke about Green Iron Man being dumb in my last video, but a lot of people apparently like that sort of thing, so here's Green Wolverine, hope that makes you happy, you freaks. Anyway, I'll give this thing an 8. The design isn't amazing, but it's decent and the recolors are neat. Wolverine's Midnight Sun suit is kind of funny. It has the normal Midnight Sun gold and black design work and magic runes you'd expect, but the thing I think is funny is his claws. They have these harpoon-like additions at the end of them that raise some rather humorous questions. If these things are bigger than his normal claws, when he retracts them, do these bits stick out of his hands? Or do his claws pull in further? Does it hurt more when they come out? Because these are physical additions to the claws, not some kind of magical energy constructs. You can tell when you zoom in that they are physical objects that have been attached to the claws. This is all minor nerd stuff, but it's funny to think about. The suit itself outside of that is fine. I think it sticks a bit too close to Wolverine's default suit, especially from the waist down. It's not bad, but it is something that I never use. Not even the recolor that adds blue is to my liking. I really think the boots should be blue here. Anyway, giving this thing a 6 or 7 out of 10, somewhere there. The Logan outfit is a casual set of digs taken directly from the Fatal Attraction story, where Wolverine has the adamantium in his body ripped out. Fun fact, these wrappings around his arms aren't just for decoration. See, Wolverine's healing factor wasn't working at this time, so popping his claws would cause a lot of bleeding, and that's why these wraps are there. His claws were also bone claws at the time, since, you know, no adamantium, and this game has faithfully captured that as well. As neat as all of this is, I can't say that I like this suit, and I never wear it. I don't really like casual outfits for superheroes, but for Wolverine specifically, I can't stand it. I'm so sick of him wearing normal clothes in the movies and stuff, so I just want to see him wear his actual costume. I'll give this thing a 6 since it's kinda cool and they clearly worked hard on it, but it's not for me. Oh right, the recolors. Yeah, these are all just kinda whatever. Wolverine's last costume is his X-Force suit. Just like Deadpool, I think this should have been a recolor of the default suit and not a distinct costume. Once again, this Steel Wind recolor is already pretty close. Just give it red eyes and a red belt buckle, and there you go. But no, they made this its own costume with its own model, and they didn't even really do it right. They've added these lights to the costume that aren't even the same red as his eyes and buckle, and I don't think glowing LEDs fits the covert Black Ops nature of the suit from the comics. Another thing is that the suit is often, not always, but often drawn with horizontal lines on the gloves. Sometimes they're lines, and sometimes they're straps, but the point is that they're nearly always there. This suit barely has that, a little bit here, but not a whole lot. This might seem like a really minor thing, and it sort of is, but if they really wanted to make this suit stand out and be more unique, then I feel like this is something that they should have leaned into. This suit also has a classic yellow and blue recolor, which once again keeps the red eyes. Why? So yeah, overall I'll give this thing like a 5 or 6. It's not ugly or anything, but there's like 100 other suits that would have been better than this. That's everything for Wolverine. I'm a little disappointed in his selection of costumes, but there are at least a few things that I like here. I've got a couple of costumes I would have liked to have seen in this game. The first is his costume from Ultimate X-Men. Not the one he has at the beginning, that one sucks. The other one he got a bit later with the stripes. That thing looks cool. Outside of that, the only other suit I would want is his Astonishing X-Men suit. It's essentially just a more modernized version of his classic yellow and blue costume, but not the version that has the X symbol on the chest. I don't know if this is counted as a separate costume entirely, but just to be safe, I'll specify that I don't like this version. I know that I just said that I like Wolverine's Ultimate costume that also had an X symbol on the chest, but it's not the same thing. That outfit's top is simpler, so the X badge adds to it, but this suit already has enough going on and the badge only clutters things up. I've now gone over all the X-Men and Midnight Suns. What did you think of their costumes? Remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next thing I do. Okay, bye now.